Chapter 8. Back at the precinct again, Garfield was told by Moran to fetch the man called Nash from the cells. Bedso went and sat on the windowsill of the interrogation room, while Moran paced the room in front of the desk. There was a sharp pain in his gut, and he wondered whether to send out for a glass of milk, but decided against it. He was not in the mood for taking the jibes that went with such a request. His wife, Alice, had nagged him to eat something before he went out on the call, but as usual, he ignored her. "I'll get something on the way," he had said. Right at that moment, he was prepared to dislike Nash intensely for getting him out of a warm bed beside a warm wife, just as he had been falling off to sleep. Then he mentally reprimanded himself. There was no proof, yet, that Nash was the cause of all this. Garfield entered, pushing Nash before him. The fair-haired, unshaven Nash met Moran's stare with eyes that seemed just a shade too confident for someone dragged in as a murder suspect. Garfield shoved Nash down into a chair behind the desk, and then took up a position close by, his arms folded, leaning against the glass screen behind which the normal chaos of the precinct could be seen in flow. Moran nodded at Bedso, who left the office, to return a moment later carrying a sword wrapped in a transparent plastic bag. He put it in front of Nash on the desk. Still, no one had spoken to the suspect. Moran went to his filing cabinet and took out a folder. He opened it and tossed a photograph in front of Nash. "Ever seen this guy before?" Nash leaned towards the photo and then shook his head. Moran sighed. "His name's Vasilek." Nash looked up, but there was no sign that he recognized the man. It was more a look of inquiry. "Polish national," continued Moran. "Had his head chopped off in New Jersey 2 nights ago." He paused. "You ever get over to New Jersey, Nash?" Nash pulled his raincoat closer around his body, as if to try to straighten out the creases. When he looked up again, it was almost as if he were surprised that Moran was still waiting for an answer. "Not if I can help it." The tone was belligerent. Moran suppressed a desire to lose his temper. That never did any good with people of Nash's sort. You had to treat them with at least the minimum of respect. Otherwise they clamped up completely, and you could be there all night, talking into an empty space. Garfield snorted. "You talk funny, Nash. Where are you from?" he said. Nash replied, "Lots of different places." Moran moved round beside the chair. He said, "You're an antique dealer, right?" "Uh-huh." "Okay," said Moran, pointing to the sword. "What's that?" Nash leaned forward and looked closely at the package. He smiled. "A sword?" Garfield unfolded his arms. "Wise up, smartass!" There was an exchange of glares between the two men, and Moran picked up the weapon, turned it over in his hands, then gently replaced it on the desk again. He said, "It's a Toledo Salamanca broadsword, worth about $1 million. The return retort was sharp. "So? So you want to hear a theory?" "Suit yourself." Moran leaned over, near to Nash's shoulder. You went down to that garage to buy this sword from that guy. What's his name? I don't know. You tell me. Moran straightened again. That goddamn trick only ever worked in the movies. They never fell for it in real-life situations. He said wearily, His name is Iman Fasil, and you fought about the price and you cut off his head. Nash laughed out loud. When he had finished, he said, You want to hear another theory? This Fasil was so upset about the lousy wrestling tonight, he went down to the garage in a fit of depression and cut off his own head. Moran was irritated to hear Bedso laugh behind him. That's not funny, Walt. Garfield had obviously decided it was time for a jibe. You a faggot, Nash? He sneered. Nash turned and smiled at the officer. Why? Are you cruising for a piece of ass? Garfield went crimson, and Moran saw his fingers bunch into a fist. The officer stepped forward, then hesitated before saying, I'll tell you what happened. You went down to the garage for a blowjob, and you just didn't want to pay for it. Nash looked at Moran and then back at Garfield. You sick bastard, he said, his voice laced with contempt. Garfield lunged at him clumsily from where he stood, and Nash only had to move back his head a fraction for the officer's blow to miss. Then a hand flashed out and gripped Garfield's wrist, twisting it away from his body. The officer yelled in pain, pulling Nash to his feet. Things were getting out of hand, and Moran intervened. Hey! Cut it out! People were staring through the glass from the other room, wondering what the confusion was about. The desk sergeant looked about to come across, then changed his mind at a nod from Moran. Bedso cried, Wait! Garfield flung another punch, which skidded off Nash's shoulder, and then found himself rammed, face first, against the glass partition. His nose and mouth were flattened against the screen, and a black kid mimicked his distorted features. Some hookers cheered and began stamping their feet. Nash then spun him around. Moran shouted, That's enough! He jumped forward, forcing his body between them, his ulcer giving him hell. The winos in the charge cells were shaking the netting and hooting. That's enough! Cut it out! God damn it, this isn't a circus! Then why the gorilla? Said Nash. Moran breathed heavily through his nose. I said that's enough! Nash queried. Am I under arrest? Not yet. Then we're through. We're just getting started. Well, for Christ's sake, get on with it and stop screwing around. Ask me the questions. God, thought Moran. It's going to be a long night.